Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections, the show from Torch Trust that talks about faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and I'm really pleased to spend the next 30 minutes with you. As some of you may know, we welcomed a new Chair of Trustees following the sad passing of Michael Townsend in late 2023. His name is Tony Brown, and today we'll have the chance to get to know him a little better. He'll be sharing a bit about himself, as well as a recent cruise he took along the beautiful west coast of Africa. Tony Brown has been serving as Chair of Trustees for a little while now, so we thought it was high time our listeners got to know the person behind the role. He recently sat down for a chat with our producer, Lynn Davies. Here's their conversation.
Hi Tony, welcome to Reflections.
Hi Lynn, it's great to be with you.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself in case they haven't come across you?
Where would you like me to start? Because I was born at a very early age. And lived in Nottingham. And at the age of 11, I started a new school. And one of the friends that I made, because we had to walk backwards and forwards to school, he went to the church just across the way from us. I've never been to the church at all. But there was a boys' meeting, a kind of a bit like a scouts meeting, but non-denominational as such. And they had a snooker table. And so I'd always fancied playing snooker, having watched Pot Black in black and white, decided it was ever so easy I could do that. So I went along to the meeting, and the meeting consisted of various games and things, and then a little epilogue at the end. And after a few weeks of going along, I was listening to the epilogue, and it was telling me about how Jesus had died for me to make my life real and have a relationship with him. So at the age of 11, that sounded incredibly logical. And so I thought that's what I would do. And as such, I became a Christian. And that kind of changed my life, but not dramatically. But when I was about 15, one of my good friends at school, he was a rugby player. And he used to play for the school. And one Friday, I'd said goodbye to him, see you on Monday. And then on Monday, we got to school to find out that he'd had an accident playing rugby. He'd managed to get kicked in the head and died of a brain contusion. So that really shook me up, because I was thinking, well, if that would have been me, where would I be? What would have happened to me? And so at that point, I really sort of dedicated my life to God. And it's been a tremendous adventure. We've done all sorts of things, various places. We moved from Nottingham down to Reading, and then a few years later, we've moved back up to the Midlands area. So we currently live in Warwickshire, a place called Southam, and I'm one of the ministers of the church, the Southam Community Church. But I still feel that very privileged that God is an interest in me, and that I can have a real life relationship with Jesus Christ.
How did you come to be involved with Torch Trust?
Okay, well, my involvement with Torch Trust started just after we moved into the Midlands area, which was in 2009. And I was a minister of the church in Reading, but also did a little bit of itinerant preaching. And I'd been invited to preach at a church in Corby, and went there in the evening service. And the lady who listened to me speaking and said, "Oh, where do you come from?" So we told her that we lived near Daventry, which is just a little bit away from the village that we were in. She said, "Oh, do you know?" And she gave the name of a person who was part of the Torch Fellowship group in Daventry. And so she said, "Can I give him your number?" So we met up, and within it seemed like a space of a couple of minutes, but it was probably 2 or 3 weeks, we got involved in the Torch Fellowship group at Daventry. And it was a great time. I helped out, and we worked there together. And then the following year, which would be 2010, we took our fellowship group, down to the Hurst Pierpoint holiday centre for a holiday, and we had an absolutely great time. Really enjoyed it, and I was invited back to do another holiday that year, and it was there when I met Gordon Temple, who was then the CEO of Torch. And over the week, we got chatting and talking, and he said, "Oh, would you like to become a trustee of Torch?" So that's what's happened, and I carried on being a trustee since I think it was probably about 2010, something like that. But became head of finance, and then Mike Townsend, who was the then chair of the trustees, died suddenly away on holiday, and I stepped in. So basically, that's where I've been doing the job for being chair of trustees, which is a great job, and it's a real privilege because it enables me to travel about meeting all sorts of genuinely inspirational people. And it's been great going to some of the Torch fellowship groups and the meetings and getting involved in the coffee morning at Torch, etc. And I'm on one of the holidays this year as well.
Oh, that's really exciting. So, what are some of the perks or some of your best experiences so far? You have listed some of them already, of course, but are there one or two sort of standout experiences that you've had since becoming chair of trustees?
I think one is getting involved with well, we went over to Torch Malawi. So Sarah Dawkins and Paul Wood and myself went over to see the team there in Malawi, producing Braille documents in various languages within Malawi. And that was a great experience, meeting some of the very hard to get to villagers, and seeing their people with Braille listening to the word of God, which was great. I think the other standout memory so far has been the fact that we went over to Northern Ireland for the regional groups, and I met a lovely person called Marie. And Marie McCarroll is the name of the lady, and she is 92 and has been blind for the last 2 years. She was a missionary to over 3 continents, over a lifetime, gave her life to the Lord when she was only young. But she was an inspiration because what she said to me, which I thought was really good, was that she didn't want people to pray for her because she was blind so that she could see again. She just wanted to pray that she'd get closer to God. And she said the last 2 years of her life have been the closest and the most deepest and richest time that she's had in fellowship with God, because it's drawn her to lean more upon God and less upon her own strength. And I think that's a good lesson to learn for every one of us, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Marie McCarroll was actually interviewed on Reflections
Oh, is she?
last month, I think. I can't remember the exact date, but
Well,
she was quite a remarkable lady. And she was talking about this convention and did mention your talk specifically, finding it challenging in a good way. So
oh, okay,
I
there we
think
go.
the like was very mutual there.
Yeah, yes, she was a really encouraging lady, and it was good to meet her. But there's people all over the country that we've now kind of been to, where you can see people have just been plodding along, but they've been getting a relationship deeper with God, and also they've been able to share that with other people in either the Torch fellowship groups or the various other activities that we get involved with.
So, what is your experience then around sight loss or sight issues?
Uh, I guess we've always had, for some reason, people in our churches who have had difficulties with sight. I, personally, in the family, we've not had any sight loss or anything like that. But we always had friends who we've been working with and helping. And it's always been an amazing thing for me to, because sometimes I sit in the meeting and I close my eyes, and it's not because I've gone to sleep. It's because I want to have the same kind of experience as someone who couldn't see. And it is a different world. And one of the things that I've been finding out is how different it is, but also how positive it can be in terms of understanding how to do that. And part of what I think God has given upon my heart is how can I help those who can't see physically, how they can see spiritually what God can do for them.
You spoke a little bit about Malawi, but you also recently went to Africa as well for a holiday, and the cruise that you went on sounded very interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, we always been fascinated by the African continent, and I've been to several places, mainly down the east coast. So our daughters both worked in Ethiopia for a number of years. So we regularly went over to Ethiopia, but we've been to Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, Egypt, and what have you. But we hadn't ever done the kind of west coast of Africa. So we happened to see a holiday which was a cruise that started off in Cape Town in South Africa and then made its way all the way along the coastline of Africa, and ended up in Portugal. So we're called into places like Namibia and Angola and Ghana and the Gambia and Senegal and places like that, just to have a look at the cultures that were there. And it was a very interesting experience, in a couple of ways. One, when we met the people, it was always fascinating. There were a lot of people living in poverty, but they didn't feel poor. They felt a happiness and a joy. Particularly in Ghana, which is a majority Christian country. And as we were touring round, we saw hundreds of people, all dressed in white, going to church. And we could see some of the churches, they were just, like big canopies underneath a tree or next to a tree with people singing and dancing and really enjoying the experience of worshiping God. And so that was one of our highlights as well. But also, we went to a ghost town, which used to be a diamond mine that was abandoned. I climbed the highest sand dune in Namibia, which is a great big desert, goes all the way from uh, north of South Africa all the way through to Angola. And I managed to get up close and personal with a crocodile, and were able to stroke its back.
Oh, I have done that as well,
Have
actually.
you? Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing because I mean, we've spent a lot of time on the sort of in West Africa because my family is Sierra Leonean and
right.
we go to Gambia on holiday because it's just become one of our holiday destinations that we like as a family.
Yeah,
And they have this crocodile place there where you can go and stroke them when they're docile.
yeah. Well, it was exactly the same place. It's we kind of the coach that we went in couldn't get to it, so it stopped and we had to walk through the village. And then we turned up with what I was thinking would be something like a zoo enclosure where you could look down on a pool with crocodiles swimming in it. But they were all over the place. So that was quite fascinating as well. Oh, that's good to know that you've probably stroked the same crocodile as I did.
Maybe we struck, yes. And I remember putting pictures on social media with me sitting down stroking the crocodile, and everyone said, "Weren't you scared?"
Yeah.
And no, absolutely not, because once it's full, if it's not hungry, I have seen crocodiles attack before,
Yeah.
which was very, very interesting and very scary. But once they have eaten, they are completely fine.
Yes. Yeah, unless you don't poke them in the eye or up the nose or something, which I guess might
Yeah.
irritate them.
To be fair, I think a human would bite you if you did that as well.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yes, I think I probably would do that too. Yeah, so we had a lovely time. It took us a month to get along the coast because what I didn't appreciate, although I kind of was aware, Africa is such a big continent. Getting from place to place just takes a long time.
I understand you also saw the places where the slaves were shipped out in Ghana. Is that right?
We did, yeah. We saw lots of those kind of places, as well. The one that struck out to me most was actually in Namibia, and we were in a place called Luderitz, which is one of the ports. And just up from the ship, there was a place called Shark Island. And Margaret, my wife, and myself walked up to Shark Island. We knew nothing about it whatsoever, but it turned out to be one of the first death camps in kind of the history. It was dated in 1904 or 1908, and it was an attempt to wipe out the Harara people by the Germans. And this camp, it actually was an island. It's now got a kind of walkway to it. But basically, they were captured, brought there, and really just starved to death. And the name Shark Island was because when they die, they just threw the bodies into the water, and the sharks would circle and eat them. And that was a really hard-hitting time, because we were there on our own. There was only just they put a new memorial up to what had happened and owned up to it. But it was a really kind of startling fact to think how inhumane people can be to other human beings. And that was quite a shock to the system, as well as the slave trade, obviously. A lot of the slave trade was Portuguese from West Africa going over to Brazil. Some was obviously going to the Caribbean as well. And I've been reading a book called The Scramble for Africa by a man called Thomas Pakenham. And that's been a real eye-opener to me in terms of history as to man's inhumanity to man. But I'm so glad that even when Jesus received that inhumanity, he was able to look at his captors, and the words that he spoke were, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do."
I can only imagine how powerful it must have been to visit the very places where so many were taken from the African continent. It must have been both moving and deeply educational. But of course, this is such an important part of our shared history to reflect on. I'm sorry to say we're out of time for this week, but we'll be back next week with more stories and reflections. And don't forget, if you're blind or partially sighted and would like to learn more about any of the services provided by Torch, including the Hope for All project, that's to do with children, our Torch Together holidays, our accessible books and resources, or our other groups, our client services team would be very happy to speak with you. The number to call for information and for song requests is 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260, or you can email info@torchtrust.org. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Torch Trust on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reflections. And so until next week, from me, Marilyn and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.